I just hit 200K in one of my portfolios. And this one is highly weighted into one of my core foundational anchor investments, which is FXAIX. So that one index fund is 95% of this portfolio. And then we have 5% into a couple of individual stocks that I'm keeping my eye on to make sure that they are on track for continued growth. So let's get into what this portfolio is looking like, growing from 123,000 to 200K. Simplicity doing most of the work. Okay, let's get into the numbers. Back in August of 2023, I rolled over this balance, $122,756 from Empowerment to Fidelity. And now, 2 years and 8 months later, this portfolio is at $200,514. FXAIX, the Fidelity 500 Index Fund, is up about 59%. NVIDIA is up 58%. And Taiwan Semiconductor is up about 113%. Overall, the total portfolio has gained about 60%. So my core position, FXAIX, it's simply the S&P 500, exposure to the top 500 companies in the US. This fund has been around since 1988. It has a low expense ratio. You don't have to pick all the winners. I own them all by investing into this fund. It's most heavily weighted into NVIDIA, along with Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Broadcom, Meta, Tesla. I own them all. And so every time the market goes up, every time these individual companies grow, so does my portfolio. I get quarterly dividends, which I reinvest. I've never added a dime to this portfolio, just that rollover amount, but it's been steadily building from those dividends as well as the growth of the fund and those companies. So I've done this with this portfolio and others. This one was created from my first job. I don't combine my IRAs into one. I have them separate. Unfortunately, over the years, I've been laid off a few times. And so each one of those jobs has left me with a 401k that I then rolled over and took on the task of managing on my own. Now back to the individual companies in this portfolio. Only 5%. And as we saw, the fund gives me exposure to NVIDIA, but I also wanted to own more of it directly. I have it in other portfolios also. So combined, I'm getting about 9% exposure to NVIDIA, but this was intentional. There are some companies that I want to have direct exposure to get that additional growth. But I love having ETFs and index funds in my portfolio for that simplicity, stability, and steady growth. That recovers, has a historical history for me to be able to reflect on. Just so many benefits. So NVIDIA, which I'm currently up about 58% on, is an industry leader when it comes to AI, data centers, and those chips. It's had tremendous growth over the last few years, and it's still on track to do more. Just like some other companies that I'm going to continue incorporating into my portfolio. Here's a look at the potential upside for NVIDIA, which is 31%, and two other Mag 7 companies that I'm working on. Meta, about 39%, and Microsoft, 45%. And here's a look at Taiwan Semi. And though I am up over 100%, there is still a potential upside when it comes to this one also. Over the last year, it's up about 142%. On the day, currently, it's up over 5%. The semiconductor sector is showing strength, and that's what this company does. It is a global chip manufacturer. So making sure to allocate some funds into individual stocks like this are not random picks. They are truly industry leaders that are positioned for growth. So when it comes to building this portfolio, I wanted that low expense ratio, diversification, and a small amount into some companies that I had a high conviction in. Nothing complicated. Now that I've created that portfolio heavily weighted into my core position, FXAIX, I'm striving for more growth in other portfolios that I hold over at Fidelity. These are a few of the funds that are a bit more aggressive that I've been working on. SPMO, which is Invesco's S&P 500 Momentum ETF, focusing on 100 companies from that S&P 500 that have a high momentum score. SMH, which is the FXAIX semiconductor ETF, again, giving me additional exposure to semiconductors, which have been thriving. And then FSPGX, which is the Fidelity Large Cap Growth Index Funds, higher concentrations into many of the same funds in the S&P that are on track for continued growth, and all funds that will balance and keep me on track. Of course, I'm still on my journey. I just hit a milestone. It didn't happen overnight. I worked at that job for many years, and now I've taken a handle of it to have myself on track for continued growth. I've given myself a strong core. I've stayed consistent. I've stayed invested, never tapping into my retirement accounts because that's what they are for when I am in my true retirement age. And of course, giving it time to grow, being mindful of what I'm invested into to make sure that I am on track to achieve my goals. So remember, you can build wealth without doing anything complicated. They say that first 100K is a grind, and then the second comes easier from the momentum, from the power of compounding. And then from there, everything changes. If you haven't already, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, hype, leave me some comments, let me know. How do you go about investing for retirement? Are you picking a lot of individual stocks when it comes to building your IRA? I want to encourage you to have a handle of every account from those past jobs, making sure that you're maximizing them. Before we wrap up, I'm going to give a recap of the story of how I came about building this portfolio over at Fidelity. As I gained knowledge over the last few years about the stock market, about expense ratios, about the performance, I got around to taking a look at this fund, which was left off at Empowerment after my layoff. I was invested into this fund, MXBDX, an Empowerment Lifetime Target Date Fund, which currently has an expense ratio of 0.88%, drastically higher than FXAIX at 0.015%, in addition to that very high fee that would have been eating away at my returns. Here's a look at the performance of these two funds over the last 5 years. The average return of that target date fund is a little over 6%, while FXAIX, the S&P 500, is over 13%. So I was on track to be losing out significantly. Even though this fund's top investment is the S&P 500, mixing in international bonds, mid cap, real estate is not creating a mix that can outperform the S&P 500 directly. So don't be intimidated by your portfolio. Have an understanding of those fees as well as the performance. Set a bar for yourself, set a standard. This is your hard-earned money. Make sure that you're on track to achieve your goals. And remember, what I share here is my personal financial journey, never financial advice. I know that having an understanding of investing is so important. We need to be able to take care of our older selves. We cannot depend on Social Security. And I want us to all have our eyes open so that we are not in any underperforming investments. I want to see us all winning, thriving, on track for financial freedom, financial stability, financial invincibility. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.